Hey, podcast listeners, welcome to another episode on the Asset Reliability at Work podcast. I'm your host, Derek Kelly. In today's conversation, we'll be speaking with Tara Holwegner, who's a Learning and Performance Improvement SME and also this show's co-host, to talk about the education and training side of a reliability transformation. Tara's going to explain why manufacturing organizations are utilizing education leaders when it comes to a change initiative. So let's get the conversation started with Tara Holwegner and the role of education in a reliability transformation. Welcome to another episode of the Asset Reliability at Work podcast. Today's episode features Tara Holwegner. You might know Tara because she's actually the new co-host of this podcast, but we sat back and we're kind of thinking who would be a great person to have on this podcast and talk about their expertise. And I just kind of looked to my right and I said, Tara, you would be perfect.
I'm happy to be on this side as an interviewee and not an interviewer this time.
And we're happy to have you. So Tara is actually on the podcast, as I mentioned in the intro, to talk about the education and training piece of a reliability transformation.
Right.
Reliability is obviously the main topic of the podcast that people tune in for. And so there's not many people know about what happens on the education side of what has to happen when it comes to education and starting that reliability transformation. So Tara's going to go on and explain a lot about that. So really, let's just get right into it, Tara, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's briefly first explain what a reliability transformation is, and then we'll move on and talk about the education piece.
Reliability transformation has a lot of components. In reliability excellence, we look at a transformation in 4 areas primarily. First, you have asset reliability, which is, does a piece of equipment do what it's meant to do, when it's supposed to do it, for how long you want it to be performing that function. Then you have process reliability, which, as Jim Fye always used to say, are you doing the right thing the right way? And then you have your workforce, an empowered, engaged workforce where you have current skills and future skills defined. And then finally, effective leadership and sponsorship support. And all of these pieces in a transformation are working together to improve operational performance and to achieve operational excellence. So you've got asset reliability, process reliability, engaged and empowered workforce, and then effective leadership. When all those pieces are working together, then you as an organization, as an enterprise, are achieving excellence.
Okay, so now we get this idea of what a reliability transformation kind of looks like, high-level stuff. Tell me more about the role that education plays in a successful change initiative.
So education is going to be focusing on that engaged and empowered workforce. It's also going to be tying into asset and process reliability, but it's primarily around the workforce. So when you're going through a transformation, that is a major change. And
we're talking about change, a major change being what exactly? Are we talking like a complete shift in management, or can it be something down just process level stuff? Or
right, and it's all inclusive. Anytime that someone is asked to do something new,
right,
it's a change. And you have to learn something new in order to be able to change your behavior and go through that change.
Okay.
So a simple example, like you stated, was, for example, when you get a new cell phone. That's a change. You have to go through a period of a little bit of frustration while you're learning how to use that new phone in a new way. Ultimately, though, you get the benefits of the new technology, but there is a little learning curve there, a little bit of frustration that goes with that. So we always say that learning is change and change is learning. So learning how to do that new thing in that new way, and each individual learning how to do a new thing in a new way, will roll up for you to be able to transform your whole organization. Everybody's got to learn something new. Everybody's going to take their own time to learn that new thing in that new way, but we are there to support them. And education and learning has 2 real primary purposes during a change or transformation, like a reliability journey. The first is you're going to have some targeted educational communication pieces. That's to let people understand, why are we going through this? What is this change? What does it look like? What's my role? going to be during this change. So you have some education or some training that's related to that. It's communication that could take many forms. This could be an in-person session. It could be a video, preferably by the leadership. Could be a printed form of communication and e-communication. So there are many different ways that learning piece can be executed to help people understand more about the change and see themselves in what's that going to look like for them, what's in it for me.
Sure.
So then there's another type of learning and education that we experience during a transformation, and that would be the skills and knowledge-based education. So you're referring to a process change. Mm-hmm. So that process, maybe a business change requires a new software that you have to use. So there's going to need to be some training so the person and the individual who's going to be using that software can improve their skills so that they become proficient. It could also be new responsibility in your role. Say that there was a process flow change. Actually, you're developing a new product or you're going to be producing a new product. This is going to require people to be interacting with the equipment in a different way. And that's going to change their day-to-day life. So you would have some individual coaching and some training that's targeted on how that individual can improve their knowledge and skills so that they can move from their current state to a desired or expected state of performance, a more reliable state.
Okay, so we mentioned in the intro that your position is within the Lifecycle Institute, which is the learning side, the entity of lifecycle engineering. So the Lifecycle Institute developed a concept called high-impact learning. I want to know more about this. So can you explain what it is and how does that exactly help manufacturing organizations with reliability and this transformation?
So high-impact learning is based on the concept that people learn by doing, by practicing skills on the job, and they also learn from coaching and interacting with their peers. So we developed a concept at the Institute called ELearning, and this is a process that can allow organizations to get the most out of their training or out of their learning engagements. During a reliability transformation, the results from a 3A learning or from the very targeted education that we provide is that people know what the change is, why it's necessary, and what the expectations are to perform the tools and skills that are going to help them to get to that level of performance. So the 3 A's, align, assimilate, and apply, are all focused on achieving those objectives, letting the learner know before they go into an educational event what is it that their managers want them to get from that training, how they plan to apply the training, because learning is doing, and the results that those new actions are going to achieve, and how those results from applying those new skills are tied to organizational goals. So even before somebody goes into training or before we design a solution, the people know what they're going to learn, what they're going to do with it, and how that application is actually tied to one of their business goals. So they can see a straight line of sight from the learning that they're about to experience and how their individual actions are going to contribute to a greater goal.
All right, Tara. So up to this point, you and I have gone over the role education plays within a successful reliability transformation. We've also talked about the concept of high-impact learning and the 3 A's that are part of that. But now I want to talk about the when. So at what point are facilities reaching out to you or the Institute to kind of have that third-party education leader experience come in and help them with this change? Because I imagine that most facilities are like people like myself. We want to try to get it done ourselves. We believe we can get it done ourselves. But there's just a point that people realize I need a little bit of help. So just tell me about the when of this. When do manufacturing facilities reach out?
Typically, we'll have clients reach out to us for a couple different reasons. First, either they are maybe entering into an environment with new regulations. They know that they're going to have some new processes necessary, or they're going to be implementing some new software where they know right off the bat that they can't do this alone. They are going in uncharted territory. They know they need help right away. And so they come to us maybe during their planning stages of the implementation. Then there are companies who don't necessarily know that they need a partner right off the bat, but they are going to be doing some production improvements, or they're starting a continuous improvement program, or they know that they have a defined skill gap that they need to fill. And they get started on their path, and then they realize that they're probably not getting all of the benefits that they really wanted to see. And so they need someone to come in as a therapist to point out where the gaps are and where they could be receiving more benefits.
Sure.
Finally, there's another client, and we've had examples of a few of these recently, where they want to own their reliability transformation or their performance and skills improvement program, but they may not have the bench strength, if you will. Mm-hmm. Their resources are going to be consumed, their internal resources are going to be consumed with the technical aspects of the implementation and with being their internal subject matter experts, and they need to be there for their plants and for their sites and be that leader. So they don't have the time to do the training or the education or the one-on-one coaching or the focus group coaching or the work team coaching that is going to help their transformation be more successful. So then they reach out to us so we can supplement their efforts and help their programs achieve all the benefits they want to achieve.
So one quick follow-up to that, Tara. As you said, the manufacturing facility might have their own SMEs, their internal SMEs, devoted to other resources, which is why people like the Life Cycle Institute would come in and help out with that education and training. But you work with the actual facility to make sure that your education and training aligns to the overall goals of the manufacturing organizations.
Absolutely. So when we begin talking with someone who is or a site that's experiencing a performance issue, we'll go in and we'll analyze and find what is the root cause, of the performance issue, and is training and is education the answer? It may not be. There might be some other avenues that we would want to investigate. There might be a process change, or it might be a tools and resources issue, and not necessarily a knowledge and skills issue. So first we'll identify that. We'll find out what the goals of the organization are. What's happening now? Where do I want to be? And then we'll design a solution for them that is targeted at achieving those goals. Then, through the 3A learning process that we described earlier, we get down to the individual level and we say, okay, here's what your organization wants. Here's what we have designed for you. Talk with your manager, determine what are your priorities in terms of skills and knowledge, and then what are you going to be able to do to show that you've learned this, and how is that going to contribute to the business?
So, Tara, I'm actually really curious about the development of your training program, because you can't just have one canned education program and expect it to work for all facilities, obviously. So how do you customize training?
Engineers and our listeners that are interested in reliability are probably going to be familiar with a Six Sigma term, DMAIC, and Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA. Well, in the instructional design community and profession, we have a standard process that we follow, which is called ADDIE, ADDIE, Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, and Evaluate. So although every learning solution is different, and that when we go to a site, they may want to use different case study examples that are more relevant to their industry, or they may want to use more certain images or examples that the learner is going to recognize because it's going to be more relevant to their current environment. We still follow that main instructional design process to ensure that we have quality standards. So first, we'll work with our clients to do a needs analysis on the performance issue, just like we discussed earlier. What's the outcome that you want to see, and what's currently going on in your environment? Once we determine that training is the answer, or is the best solution and another performance improvement solution really won't fit, then we'll go through a design process where we come up with those relevant examples and stories. We try to access and assess the learner's prior experience so that they are able to either link their current understanding with what we're presenting, or maybe even change their minds about what their prior experiences have been with our learning topic. Then we develop the solution itself. So whether that is a classroom course where we have some supporting slides and a workbook with exercises, or if it's an e-learning solution, or if it is another sort of electronic job aid with a specific coaching schedule. So we have a blended solution in that way. So we actually develop what that performance solution will be. Then we implement it in a pilot, and we'll do evaluations, both from an instructional design side and from the learner perspective. So then we'll go back and improve our learning solution, make sure it's getting the results that we want it to get in terms of what the business is seeing, and move forward in a continuous improvement at that point.
You mentioned something in there about e-learning, because not many organizations are available to have you come on site to kind of give that training. So what kind of options do you offer, or will the Institute offer for e-learning?
We're currently in development for a maintenance planning and scheduling e-learning solution that is going to take our classroom course and actually transitions everything online. One thing that we like to work with our clients on is, just like in our classroom-based courses, we know that the real learning happens when you do it on the job. So just as we would a high-impact learning engagement on site, where we go through the 3A process and we define the learner's goals and how those are tied to the organization's objectives, we would encourage and can work with our clients to do the same thing with our e-learning. But in the learning community, it's called flipping the classroom. So they'll experience the e-learning, and then when they come and they meet with their mentor or with their team lead, or it might be a life cycle engineering coach, then they're actually working with them on execution of what they learned in their e-learning modules.
Okay, so it's a piece of the pie.
Right.
Okay, I gotcha. Well, Tara, I think that'll wrap up today's episode. I do want to point people who are listening to our show notes, which is lce.com/podcast. For this episode, you can find 2 links. One is to the High Learning Impact webpage. We talked about that throughout this episode. So there's where you can find more of the nitty-gritty on the 3 A's that we talked about. And you can also find another resource, a case study of sorts, about customized training that we did with Bristol-Myers Squibb. Tara, thank you so much for joining the podcast. You are the co-host of this, so we should expect to hear you on here next week, or on 2 weeks from now when we release the next episode. But I do want to say, people, that Tara is actually going to be doing another podcast, not this one, later this week.
That's right.
On the Rooted in Reliability podcast with James Kovacevic.
Right. I'll be interviewed on stakeholder management and how to use stakeholder engagement tools to increase the benefits of your project.
Yep. So actually what I'll do is I'll link you to James Kovacevic's podcast, so you also have that in the show notes. Another good podcast to listen to. So with that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thanks, Derek. This was fun.
And thank you for listening to another episode on the Asset Reliability at Work podcast. Hey, listeners, one more thing before you go. If you have any feedback for this show or this episode in particular, please hit us up on Twitter at LCE_today, or email the show at podcast@lce.com. We're always open to future episode ideas, so please let us know if you have any. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to another episode of the Asset Reliability at Work podcast.